Welcome to another episode of Making Whole, Conversations on Faith, Mercy, and Justice. I'm Benjamin, and again, joined by my friend Damien for a collaborative, curious, and consequential conversation. So as I mentioned the last time we had an episode like this, we're just trying to model what it looks like in real time to have the kinds of conversations that we desire to have in the world, and frankly, the kinds of conversations we have when we're not recording. And so for every guest that we have on the podcast, there's an episode like this, which means if you've not listened to episode 4, which is titled Belonging, hit pause, go back, listen to that conversation, and then rejoin us here. And so with that, we are going to just get right into this conversation. So Damien, how are you coming to the conversation today?
I am doing well today. I feel like I've been in a week of rest and transition as I think about starting a new role. But this break of just being able to stop thinking about all the work that I've been doing over the last few years and take a breather before I start thinking about all the work I'm going to be doing for the next few years. Uh, that's been really good. So I hope that comes across that I'm a little bit lighter today. How's it going for you? How you doing?
Good. I love that. I feel like there's two dominant realities in my heart and mind today. One is this is 4 of my kids are already on summer break, and one more joins today. And this just last month has been just event after event after event. Like my girls were trying out for their high school softball teams, and then we were ending a softball season, ending school year. This was our first school year where we had 4 different schools. 3 of those schools were new schools. And so that kind of leads into the second thing I'm feeling, which is like, I am becoming more and more introverted as I age. And the number of communities that we're proximate to is kind of overwhelming to me. And I think even something we'll get into as we talk about belonging is just like, I still, as a almost 40-year-old man, ask this question all the time of like, do I belong here? Or what does it mean to belong here? Or how am I in this space right now? And there's a tangible exhaustion I feel in my spirit from that, from just like having been in these spaces over the last couple weeks where I'm just like, oh, I don't know if I belong here or I'm included here because of I've paid to be here, the activity we're doing or whatever. And so there's just a lot of that kind of swirling on the surface for me.
Do you wear your collar around like at your kids' schools? Okay, I'm just. Yeah, I guess I'm curious if the spaces that you're in as a parent, are people referring to you as pastor, as priest? Are they seeing you as like a spiritual person in those spaces, or you get to be just parent?
So it comes up, I feel like, in the sweetest and best ways possible. So, like, I remember years ago, before I became a priest, uh, I would hear pastors talk about how when people ask them what their job is, they don't like to say pastor because of whatever
Hmm.
people say. For me, I have almost the opposite experience, and it doesn't matter whether I'm wearing the collar or not. Like, people will actually talk to me at the grocery store for no apparent reason. Like a woman literally walked up, put her hand on my cart, and started speaking to me about the items in my cart for no apparent reason. And it's almost kind of miraculous. And I kind of love it that wherever I am, people sort of begin speaking to me and talk with me. But I think in spaces like when I'm coaching my girls' softball teams or spaces like that, like when it comes up, and I don't mean this, it feels a little arrogant, but I don't mean it that way. People, when we talk about what I do for work, there's always this kind of like, that makes sense moment. And that feels good to me, honestly. Like that feels affirming. It's not, and there's sort of like a goal, right? It's like, I don't want to live in such a way where if I say to someone I'm a priest, they're like,
They're like,
really? Are you
I would
sure?
have never, I would have never guessed. I would have never
Yeah.
guessed.
So I think for me, there's I think it's come through years of spiritual direction and years of therapy, and both my spiritual director and therapist really wrestling through some vocational discernment with me, and both of them saying to me, like, you are a priest, you are a spiritual director, like no matter what you do in the world, you are those things. And so I think for me, I'm just growing in confidence to sort of live into those perspectives and realities. And so even if I'm not wearing the collar, I think it comes up in people that like this is a person that is safe to speak with and be with, and this depth sort of blossoms, which again has its own layer of exhaustion to it, right? Because you're sort of like always swimming in deep water with people. There's not I don't love small talk anymore. Like I don't really love being in the shallow end of the pool. It's like if I'm going to swim, then I'm going to swim. I'm not going to just like be in there for giggles, you know. So
Right. Right.
I think it comes up even though I'm not looking like this. I do look like this in public sometimes, you know. But typically, if I'm just in whatever my running clothes is what I kind of live in, then people still talk to me,
Makes
which is
that
it's
makes sense.
fascinating.
It makes sense. Like knowing you, that does make sense. And knowing your story and the spaces you find yourself, I'm like, okay, yeah, that aligns because I think people can resonate with that. People can resonate
Hmm.
with what's on you and what's in you,
Hmm.
and not just like a title or whatever their preconceived notions are.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I appreciate that. It's I do is a privilege, right? And a beautiful thing. And so I'm just learning that about myself. Like, how do I balance that? And how do I find, some lightness and some joy and some play and some other kinds of spaces where it's, not the depth of, offering spiritual direction to people. You're sort of like really in deep waters with people a lot. And if people are tracking along with this podcast, hopefully they're hearing that like in the conversations we're having with these guests. It's like this isn't light and fluffy, like, and this is sort of how I spend a majority of my days.
Right. So you need to like wait. So what is can you just name like one or two things that are the light for you? Like what are the light like space, the joy, the fun, the not so deep waters?
Yeah, I think the most fun I have right now is in running. So I've been over the last 3 years, I've been doing half marathons, and I'm having so much fun. I was not having fun for a while because I was getting competitive and I was frustrated with my body for not being
Mm,
better, and like wanting to have these certain like time goals and things like that. And a lot of that was released. I had like a really disappointing marathon where my knee kind of gave up and I had to walk quite a bit. But I had this embodied experience of disappointment without shame that really sort of set me free. And so I'm just having
say
fun. Like
more.
I'm just running around Smyrna, wherever I feel like going, wherever I feel like turning, whatever I feel like doing, going as fast or slow as I want, just kind of
Yeah,
embodying the release of I should be, or I have to be, or I
yeah.
whatever. That's been the most fun for me. And then I would say a close second is just my kids. Little league sports are hilarious and a
Mhm.
blast. So
Yeah,
baseball, softball, being outside is just so much fun for me just to watch my kids enjoy something and to watch them succeed and to watch them fail and to watch every bit in between and to love them through all of that has been awesome.
yeah. I love that so much. They are very cute in the uniforms and
Yes.
trying to follow plays and come through. I mean, yeah, those are really sweet moments. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's dive in. Nope, can't say that. That was actually accidental. We had this conversation before we recorded, and I'll just name it now. Uh, I recognized in this conversation with Cameron that there's language I use that may not come across the same to every person. And so I frequently say dive in or jump in. And I recognize in a conversation like the one I'm having with Cameron that may be inappropriate or may not come across the way I mean it. And so I think that was something take away for me in this conversation is that like being present to someone, knowing their story actually changes the shape of you. and that's a good thing. That I actually feel more conscious and aware of the words that I say and the people that I see, and that was a really interesting thing that I didn't think was gonna come up in me because I've been around the disability community for a few years now with my work through Hope Heals and even in the story of our own family. So, there was so much in this episode that I wanted to talk about, and I have so many questions here, and I hope we get to most of them. But I just want to go like first impressions. What did you feel as you were listening to this conversation?
I appreciate your comments because as I enter this conversation, I feel hesitant. I feel aware of my own limits in this conversation, my lack of experience, and it's not that I haven't been around or in relationship with people with disabilities, but maybe not to the most intimate levels of having them in my home
Mhm.
or really there was just things that came up when Cameron was sharing that I just began to think like, yes, one, us and them language is
Mhm.
present and it's so easy to use and not wanting to fall into that. And I hope even in this conversation that I can do my best to honor that. But thinking even just practically, if somebody was coming to my house in a wheelchair, how would they get into my home?
Mhm.
And I'm just thinking to myself, what even?
Mhm.
That's and just actually thinking about the practical nature of that, and that's where my mind started to go as the conversation went. There was a lot of a lot that I hope that we get into in our time together, but yeah, just really being aware of my limited perspective, being aware of my limited experience, and then something I hope we get into a bit later is just how I experienced my own limits
Mhm.
and how I felt challenged in this conversation to reconsider how I'm actually the story I'm telling myself around my limits,
Mm.
right? Because I
Mhm.
think there is a story. Even when we're saying, "Oh, I'm limited with how much money I have, therefore what am I telling myself?" There's just so much we can get into there, but I think just really being challenged to say like, how do I hold my limits and yeah, what's the story there?
That's good. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I I I don't know what the way to articulate it is, but one of the things I felt was just like, yeah, challenged is a good word. Um, of just like, man, there are so many things in my life that I've seen as limits that are really temporary circumstances, you know? And here's a person who is in this sort of fixed, unchangeable reality to an extent or a degree. And yet they have found a way to sort of reconcile that with their experience of God, with what they believe is possible for the world. And all of that is in such a way that is being like given away to others. And I was really encouraged by that. I was really stirred by that, um, and really energized by it. And it was interesting because I didn't remember it as much until I started, sitting with Cameron and having that conversation. That like that's how I felt when I was talking with him at dinner at camp when I first met him. It was just like, yeah, I better get about it, get about this life and ministry and the things that God's called me to, and just sort of be able to kind of process beyond just this loop I feel stuck in sometimes when I come to a limit of just like, well, this is some unchangeable reality. And so I'm just going to accept this as a truth in my life that will always be with me, rather than sort of being able to like see some different perspectives and bring it to life in a new way. So that was something I felt pervaded throughout the time with him, was just like this energetic feeling in my body of like, man, let's get about it, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it feels like if you spent time with Cameron, that you it would be a bit contagious to just
Mhm.
try to pick up on how he's viewing life. I mean, he's talking about the incident in which changes the course of his life, and I didn't hear an ounce of bitterness.
Mhm.
I didn't hear an ounce of like, and it's not that it wasn't there at some point. It's not that he didn't go through times of regret or despair, but listening to him talk about it is just like you really see so many gifts in this.
Mhm.
And that is challenging.
Mhm.
It's like, wait, am I, wow, can I be open to that many gifts
Mhm.
in situations that I wouldn't have asked for or hoped for or wanted? Situations that I can't change or I'm limited by. Um, I mean, just the invitation to consider that and what was the phrase? It was beautiful but not typical,
Mhm. Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Can this still be beautiful? I think even just asking that question, can this still be beautiful?
Mhm.
Even
Yeah.
though it's not, whatever the
Yeah.
case. Can is it? Is there still beauty here?
Yeah.
Man, I think I kind of want to write that down somewhere, just um or make it a practice with my daughter to ask her when she's disrupted in her day and she's not getting what she wants. Is like, can this day still be beautiful? I mean, maybe that's
Mhm.
too deep for her. Maybe I should just start with myself. But I just think there's a really practical invitation in that question, um that maybe could lead us to some better places than just our like despair or our frustration with our limits.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think what you're hitting on is something that comes up often in spiritual direction, which is like, how do we find the questions that are meant to be lived and not necessarily answered, right? Like, that's the kind of question you have to live in that question. And
Yes.
um, every day come to that question or every
Yes.
day come to that point. Um, and I think that is really really important to name is like there are some questions in life, there are some things that confront us and challenge us that just sort of like stick to our souls. And I felt that so many times in the conversation with Cameron of like, oh, that's on me now. And now I got to wrestle with it. And that's, I think, really good.
Mhm. Yeah. When thinking about and he starts getting to some of the theology,
Hmm.
and he starts talking about the shift for him from being someone who was, and I get it because I was in it in college. Man, did we pray for healing? Did we pray for some healing? We did,
Hmm.
you know. Coming from a space, a theological lens that says like, I believe anyone could be healed right now, and you just need to have faith, and we're gonna pray and we're gonna go after it. To I like the way he phrased it. He said, "A better hope than me
Hmm.
getting out of this chair."
Mm.
Man, talk that talk that talk, because it's not even. I mean, and I wish, yeah, I would love to talk with Cameron and get to know a little bit more of where all of his mind goes. But I hear this is just more than an arbitrary. One is like, okay, we want to be healed. I want to get out of this chair, and that's one way. And then there's the other side of like Christendom that I don't
Hmm.
always love. That's like this like ultimate healing, or like this ultimate like, and it really has nothing to do with now. It's supposed to like help us deal with the now by like hoping for the
Hmm.
future, and I can get that, but it just feels so disconnected. And when I'm hearing him talk about something that's like better than hoping for something better than him getting out of the chair, I'm hearing him talk about the relationships that he's building, the people that he's seeing flourish, the non-typical lives that are still incredibly beautiful,
Mhm.
more beautiful,
Mhm.
becoming more beautiful,
Mhm.
and I think he would witness to his own life that way.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm hearing him put those things together and move along and change for you. What's that been like?
Yeah. I agree, and I think something about that hope is, um the word that comes to my mind is dangerous. Like, it's a dangerous hope when you can look at a situation and you, with all the facts, with all the details, with all the knowledge of like, this is what this is going to be, and still hold something firm. I think that's dangerous. Like, that's dangerous to darkness, or to evil. And I think there's something really stirring in me about that. And yeah, I think, I also grew up in these like faith and healing traditions. Like, my parents, and myself to a degree, um, that's like a lineage I come from of people who have laid hands on people and seen miracles and been a part of miracles, miraculous things. And so it's interesting to like hold those two things together is like, I've seen that. Like, I've seen it in my life. Uh, I've seen both sides of the coin. Like, I've seen someone receive miraculous healing or inexplicable healing. And I've also seen, the story that Cameron is telling, which is like, that's not what's going to happen for me, and therefore like here's where my hope is now. And so yeah, I think it's a really challenging thing for me because I have an all or nothing personality at times, or an extreme personality at times, where it's like it's either this or that. And I feel challenged to just come back to the middle and just be like, where can I leave possibility open? Where can I leave hope open that something could change in this situation, but not name exactly what I want to change, or another dynamic is maybe thinking about like, how is this changing me, or what is this teaching me, as opposed to, um, how is this like tormenting me, like how does this
Right.
become a teacher, or how does this become a path to something deeper that
Yeah.
God wants me to know about how I'm made and about how the world is made and about who God is and how God works and moves. And if those paths are not the paths I would choose, um, what do I do?
Yeah.
Do I step on it or not? When I find myself in those situations, and I think there are a number of those situations in my life, and so I feel like Cameron gave us such good, faithful containers to say like, God's still good, ultimately good. There is still hope, ultimate hope. Like, there is joy, ultimate joy. And it doesn't look like what I originally thought it would look like. And that doesn't mean I have to like throw everything out. I think that's a really hopeful thing for people to think about.
And it's not disembodied. Like
Hmm.
like it's really like fleshed out
Hmm.
by his experience,
Hmm.
that this hope is not just in theory or just in in mind, right? But he's really looking at the everyday and what he's been able to still experience in his life, and say like, this is still worth experience. This right here
Mm.
is still the stuff.
Hmm.
And I like the paradigm from tormentor to teacher. Like, I think that's really helpful, because I think it is so easy, at least I'll speak for myself, to get caught in an experience. For me, with it's death, it's
Hmm.
losing someone, right?
Hmm.
And having to deal with that loss,
Hmm.
and not knowing how to face it, and not knowing how it's going to impact next week or next month or next year or next holiday, right? Like, all of these moments that we have to keep experiencing without this person it can just be very tormenting until you get to the place that you allow it to become a teacher. I think that's man, I think that's good. I think
Yeah.
when you can get, and I don't know that we can expect ourselves to just like be a student,
Mhm.
be a student, like always be ready, even in the midst of like the being flipped upside down. I think that it's okay for there to be time for you to have some disorientation
Yeah.
before you reorient, right?
Yeah.
But it's being open for what does it mean to reorient?
Yeah.
What does it mean to become a student to this experience, whether it's death, whether it's a disability, whether it's just coming up against a reality that you didn't want to be true, but it is.
Mhm.
And then asking, what does this have to offer me?
Mhm.
I think that's an incredibly brave posture. I think it is the posture that helps us move through.
Mhm.
Um, and man, does it sound hard as hell?
Mhm.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It does that for sure.
Yeah, something that, actually came up before I recorded this interview, and then, uh, it really kinda, like, I think it was, like, flashing, like, one of those, like, "Turn here, turn here, turn here," signs for me was, I there are certain limits in my life that I've been frustrated by recently, and have just been sort of kinda, like, wrestling with God about this impatience in me, and what came out of that was this prayer, which was like, help me to see, we'll just say blank thing, as a context for love and for learning rather than as a limit or a liability. And then I wrote like, I need God's grace for this. Like, I think there's some acknowledgement in there. And I think probably Cameron would say that too, is like, it's the grace of God that allows us to get to that posture or allows us to get to that mindset or perspective, because like I can't come there on my own. Like I will not. Like most of the time I will refuse to come to that conclusion on my own. But I hear that in what he's sharing is like, hey, this limit has become the container in which I'm learning to love and to live and to lead and to do all of these things in life kind of through this new lens that I now have. And I think that, um again, challenge comes up for me. It's like that's really challenging to me, but
Yeah,
like I feel desperate for that in my life in this season of like I want to learn how to like love and live within the context of this whatever this thing is at the moment.
yeah, and like having enough grace to do so, right?
Mhm.
Like just knowing that it's a process. I think it's challenging, you know, as someone as a Latino in America
Mm.
and like power dynamics, right? Like I think there's a lot as just as a minority that you're like, I'm there's so much of this world already tells me to just like deal with the world that you get anyway, the cards that you're dealt.
Mhm.
Right? I think there's a little bit of desire for wanting to hope for something better or beyond what my limits are. But I think there is even something in our, our families' histories
Mhm.
of Latinos, of African Americans, of indigenous people to like say like we're still gonna make beauty,
Mhm. Mhm.
you know? Like
Yeah.
we're like and I think sometimes looking back, we could wish that our older generations care more about their mental health or,
Yeah.
did some things a little bit differently, take care of self, but they were also doing a thing, right? And showing us a path forward by saying like our circumstances don't define us.
Absolutely.
And that can sound really shallow, but in a conversation about disabilities, right? Like this is the real stuff where we're
Mhm.
saying, you know, no, this is actually defining a lot,
Mhm.
but it doesn't define everything.
Mhm.
And I think still holding out that kind of posture to say this doesn't define everything.
Mhm. Yeah.
What does it define? What are the gifts? What are the gifts that come from it? And also there's just more to all of this.
Mhm.
Um and Cam as much as Cameron's life is in the midst of a work um advocating for people with disabilities, his life is just about way more than his own disability,
Mhm.
right? It just
Mhm.
becomes so much more than that, I appreciate the posture.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's really good. The other A couple other big themes that came up that I wanna make sure we talk about, uh, belonging was one and intimacy was another one, so we can kinda, I guess, take them in that order. Um, Belonging and this idea of sort of belonging, not inclusion, or, like, above inclusion, kind of
Mhm.
taking a step forward. Yeah, how did that come to you? I think you're on the edges of that already, talking about, being in a minority people group, but yeah, just explore that a little bit with me of, like, when he was talking about belonging, what came up in you?
I love the shift, from yeah, like because if I'm the one including, then I guess it's my circle to include, right?
Mhm,
So I think it is a better truth that we belong to each other,
mhm,
that there is a an equal footing, right, to this, that the table doesn't belong to this person or that person, but to all of us. And
mhm,
um man, I love that posture. Uh I think I'm all about that. I think when also think about belonging, I'm thinking about what comes out of people when they belong,
mm,
because I think, if you when you're spending your time trying to fit in or trying to, find your place, or I think those things that come out of you are like, you're presenting, like you're trying to be yourself, like you're trying to show who you are, versus like when the space is about belonging to each other, there's a mutual curiosity, there's a mutual pursuit, right? There's a mutual respect and reverence for each other, and when that's happening, it what comes out of you, it can be whatever is actually there,
mhm,
whether that's, I've been in spaces with friends where it's like, oh, it's sadness that needs to come out here,
mhm,
right? I've experienced that with my wife, where I'm trying to figure out what my own feelings are, but because of this space of belonging that's been created between my wife and I'm able to then draw out, oh yeah, I need to cry. I need to
mhm,
cry right now, and I need to be sad for a bit because that's what's here. And I think the safety that's created when you belong to just present exactly what is, or excitement, right? How many times that you want to share something like really exciting, but you
mm,
don't want to feel dumb, and you don't want to you don't want to out excite the person that you're going to tell. But I think when you know that there's safety in that space, then what comes out of you is the full range of those emotions that you have, knowing that they're going to be embraced, and vice
mm,
versa.
mhm.
What about for you? What comes up when you think belonging?
Yeah, so what came up for me, um it's layered. There's so many dynamics to belonging, and, uh, I was thinking about just sort of like how we first belong to God and the importance of that and how that sort of postures how we sort of move towards others in the world. But I think again, like what I shared maybe in the beginning of the conversation is, um, it really was like, where do I belong? Like that did come up in me. Like that question did come up in me. Like, what are the spaces where I belong? And I think, um, I'm still feeling that. Like that's still bouncing around in the hollows of my soul of like, yeah, over the last X number of years, there's been some intentional moving away from certain communities or certain organizations or certain kinds of theological communities even, and that has left a sense in me of a little bit of wandering and of a little bit of homesickness and a little bit of like, yeah, I feel that as well for different reasons. I
Mhm.
um I don't have a physical disability which is keeping me from entering a space, right? Or the kinds of limitations that Cameron's speaking about. But in a similar way, there are things about the way I feel like God has made me that in order to be true to those things, in order to live authentically, in order to be my full whole self, there are just communities that I can no longer participate with. And so that wrestle kind of came up in me, and I think some sadness about that. Because I think especially when it comes to um, sort of theological community, there's a sadness in me that we can't we can't sort of come to this space of just everybody belongs. So, um, yeah, I'm wrestling with that of like, yeah, what does it mean to be faithful to the reality that I believe, sort of theologically and otherwise, that
Mhm.
everybody belongs, and yet, um, there are faith communities that
Mhm.
will say everybody belongs if,
Mhm.
and so that came up in me. It was like
Yeah.
not just not just who are we excluding based on like a practical reality. Like there's
Mhm.
no ramp to the stage, or we don't like the noise that this child is making or whatever. Like we're excluding people for some real practical reasons that are not good enough for me, for me. But also we've got some theologies of exclusion that are keeping people out. And I think when later on in the conversation, when Cameron was talking about um, the embodied prophetic presence of a person with a disability, again, my mind goes to, well, what other kind of people? Like,
Mhm.
I need to know, I want to know everything about God's character. I want to know everything about who God's made. And I think it's everybody. I think God's
Yeah.
made everybody. And so if
Yeah.
in God's image everyone is made, then like I want everybody to belong. And so that came up in me of just like not just a critique of church or organized religion or anything like that, but in my own life, like in the ways I live, how do I communicate belonging to
Yeah.
everyone that I
Yeah.
interact with? Like that came up in me. It's like I want to be that human being that like makes it known to everyone you belong here.
Yeah. Yeah, 'cause I'm hearing you articulate that in a way that's really asking, like, am I comfortable saying it everyone belongs to me?
Mm-hmm.
Like, not in, like, a ownership, right? But, like, in a like, do I belong to them and do they belong to me?
Mm-hmm.
Is everyone my people, you know? And can I really say that?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's challenging. I think it's challenging when there are people that wouldn't say that about you.
That's right.
I think it's challenging when there are systems that are built around making sure they don't say that about certain people,
That's right.
right? And I think, get pride from not saying that about certain people. And uh I think the work that you're doing to really ask that question for yourself is the work,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it is that posture of challenging yourself to say, like, is person really this person really a reflection of God? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
maybe they are. Oh,
Yeah.
snap. Like, and if they are, what is that saying?
Yeah. Yeah, and
Uh,
what
it,
comes up in me is this the story of Joseph. My favorite line in that story is what the enemy means for evil, God turns for good. And not in a trite way. I've lived that in my body. Like I've been excluded from communities, pushed out, chosen to walk away, etc. for not even things that I've even said I believed out loud, but things people thought I believed, right? Because of who I would associate with myself, or who I would advocate for, or who I would say, no, like there's not a line there. There's not a limit there. And I think the unfortunate reality of that is like the enemy means to use that to convince me that people aren't safe or worth trusting or worth belonging to, and I should just sort of go it alone. And so for me, the counter formation is to say, no, like I deeply believe everybody belongs. I belong and you belong and we belong to each other, and all of this is connected. I recently officiated a wedding, and I was talking about how sort of marriage points to these layers of belonging, and the biggest layer of belonging is this cosmic belonging. Like all things belong to each other, creation, humans, all of it, animals, whatever. It's all interconnected, and I really want to believe that with my body in the spaces that I'm in. And I really want to communicate that to people. And so I think, yeah, that's what comes up in me is like the enemy would have me think, okay, it's just community is not safe. People are not safe. You don't belong anywhere. And what God would do to turn that is to actually make me a person that creates that belonging in the world that I want to see, creates that safety in the world that I want to see and experience, that I
Yeah.
deserved when I was in the situations that I was in. And so I think that, yeah, that continues to be like in my mind as I'm hearing Cameron talk about the work that he's doing and advocating in faith spaces for belonging is like, man, there's so many I hate like war language, but I think it's real. There's like so many battlefronts to this, or there's so many dynamics to this.
Mhm.
So I think he's like naming one, but I'm like, but then there's other people too, like it's that we're communicating to in other ways. And so for me, it's like, well, I want to be in relationship. I want to be in communion. I want to be in conversation with people who are not like me to
Mhm.
ensure that like what they need for belonging is being achieved as well.
Because we become literally we become more whole.
Mm-hmm.
We literally become more whole the more we engage other people who have different experiences than us. You know, how many times somebody just travels to a different country for the first time and they get back and they're like, "Oh my god, I had no idea,
Mm-hmm.
the world was like this, or that there people lived like this," and then they feel such a movement in their heart and their soul, to live a little bit differently or to impact their lives in ways that they wouldn't have anticipated. And that happens just from like going on vacation to a place, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what about when you actually join lives with people,
Mm-hmm.
when you actually invite people to your dinner table,
Yeah.
and you have to figure out how to get someone through your front door,
Mm-hmm.
right? And or to make someone feel comfortable in your home,
Mm-hmm.
or to consider the language or the rhetoric that you have around that one political idea,
Mm-hmm.
because now they're not just an idea, they're somebody at your dinner table. I think there's just the reality of someone's presence in your lives, in your life. It is I love the wording around it. It's prophetic.
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
literally speaks right into the situations at hand, and it's, yeah, you just can't have the same conversation about a thing
Yeah,
or about a group of people with them in the room
that's right.
and with them not in the room,
Yep.
right? Like there's just two different conversations, and
Yeah.
they're different because not just because of the nerves that come up when you're like, oh, I don't want to be rude, because one, if you're asking that question, maybe you should be considering your thoughts anyway. Uh, but it's really because it stops just becoming something. It's not, you're not driving in a car yelling through a window,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because that's what happens in traffic. Everybody gets bold,
Yeah.
when you're a few feet away and there's a couple sheets of metal between y'all and glass. But
Yeah.
if you're standing right next to each other, it's a very different posture, because we're here to hear.
Mhm.
And it's not about intimidation, it's actually about the fact that we're both really human,
Mhm.
and the fact that we're the same, and because we're the same, there's very real implications of how I treat you, you treat me, and how your life existing impacts.
Mhm.
It literally impacts my existence. As much as we might want to say it doesn't, as much as we try to like section ourselves off, and live our own separate lives, the lives of each other absolutely impact
Yeah.
just existing around each other.
Yeah, and I think what I wanna name here, is that what Cameron did is something I've experienced a few other times in my life, and, it is this reality that as the person that has been excluded, to come to the table knowing that and offer kindness, warmth, humility, generosity. It's grace, right?
Mhm.
He is offering grace to people every day who would otherwise not include him and people that are similar to him in many ways. And I think we miss that. And we sort of, if you're in any, because all of us are, right? All of us are in in some sense in a minority and in some sense in a majority. I think that's a truth in some way. And if you're in the us or if you're in the them or whatever, right? Like that happens. That dynamic is at play. I think something to think about is like, do I recognize that I'm being offered grace in this situation? Do I recognize that is a privilege to bear witness to his story, for him to share it with me? That I'm not owed, I'm not
Yeah,
entitled to his
yeah.
story. I'm not entitled to the deep outworkings of faith that he's sharing and expressing with me. I'm not entitled to his capacity to work with me to make the space feel okay for him and then to create some sense of belonging, right? And so I just want to name that there's an incredible grace being offered by Cameron to all of us to just get to hear his story. And I think that's something that in the belonging conversation gets lost is people are showing up in spite of being excluded and offering grace, and like that is miraculous.
And they just don't need to.
Yeah, don't
But
have to.
but it is, yeah, it's to the benefit of anyone who would listen,
Yeah,
right?
for
To
sure.
to be able to have, open ears. And this
Yeah.
and it needs to be not just a practice of like, oh, at this special event,
Mhm.
or at the or on church on Sundays, but it really needs to be, do I have ears to hear and eyes to see? I work on Monday morning and on the train home and, at the airport. Like, do I have open ears and open eyes then, as well? Not just in a situation where it's presented to you to have open ears.
Yeah, yeah, that's really good. Was I wanna round the conversation out with actually, a place where I wanted to get earlier, but here we are. The actual story, the that part of the conversation where Cameron's walking through the day of his accident and he's just sharing it, and there was one phrase um that I can't shake. The spirit of God met me underwater. And yeah, so what
Yeah.
was hearing his story like for you? What came up in you as you heard this story part of this conversation?
Well, I really appreciated his reference to his skeptical 30-year-old self
Mm, mhm.
and the younger, you know, boy who was under the water, who was there, uh, and experienced what he experienced. I mean, I sit between both of those for myself, right? Because and I tend to just lean towards the skeptic because there are so many things that are hard to explain. Things that have happened, experiences that I personally have had. And what that brings up for me is those questions, did that person, when you were praying at that apartment complex, for them to breathe because they weren't breathing,
Mm-hmm.
and then we finished praying and we said amen and they took a deep breath and they were fine. What was that?
Mm-hmm.
What was when I'm sitting in church praying for my brother, just kind of like, and I don't even know why I was praying for him, but I was just thinking about him and how our experiences were so different with God. And then someone comes up to me and mentions, "Hey, do you have a brother?"
Mm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
God wants you to not like give up hope on him.
Hmm.
And I'm like, what do I do with that?
Mm-hmm.
Person that doesn't know me, or the fact that I have a brother, like, you don't know anything about me. And the timing of this is crazy. And I think that is hard. It's hard to reckon with, because I think the skeptic in me wants to, try to give you reasons why this is the coincidence, or this is why this happened like this. And I think the person that was there wants to witness to something that they couldn't explain
Mm-hmm.
and say, I don't know what this was, but something happened.
Yeah.
This happened. And I was there and I witnessed it and I experienced it. And I don't know how to explain it all or put it all together for you, or make it a formula so that you could repeat it later.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it was something, and and more than something, it was miraculous.
Yeah.
It was good.
Yeah.
And seeing, experiencing the divine in that way just challenges a lot of our assumptions. It challenges the way that we think things work. Um, and for me, it was refreshing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also, it was also refreshing for me to hear him say, like, but what am I doing? Like, am I going around like just healing all these people? What? No, like, I'm not. He's like, that's not even the work that I'm doing now,
Mm-hmm.
and so there's a lot of balance in the story for me that really
Yeah.
helps me, because usually it's like go off one deep end or the other, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's either like hyper miraculous or not miraculous at all. And I'm hearing this tension between the two, and I'm just starting to appreciate that tension,
Mm-hmm.
uh, because I usually find myself swaying one way or the other.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good. I appreciate you naming that. Um, it felt like that. I felt a lot of that. And I felt like, so maybe I mistitled the episode, and Miracle would have been a better title.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm not trying to be clickbaity, so I don't know. I didn't want to invite everybody to the conversation, but and I think we could have a whole another episode just talking about miracles, and it could be fascinating for people. Maybe that'll happen at some point. But what came up in me was just, when did I stop believing miracles were possible? Or when did what I believed was possible change? Because I think I've seen a lot of miraculous things. Like I think I have. And I've been out of maybe those waters or those circles for a long time, and I felt that. And I felt almost like a longing to return home to an idea that nothing is impossible with God. And I feel like it's been a slow invitation for me in this calendar year. I was in Washington D.C. in March, and I was out there doing some work with the church that's a little bit more charismatic than some of the circles that I spend time in. But those are the kinds of churches that I grew up in, where speaking in tongues and prophecy and healing and miracles and all of this was like a normal part of the calendar. Like, this is what we are doing on Tuesday nights. It's intercessory prayer, or this person is coming and this service is about healing and deliverance and these kinds of things. And so I'm well versed, right? Like, I'm actually very grateful when I say this. There's not a time in my life or story where I have not believed in God or been aware of God. And that's always been a part of my story. I don't have a story of like I was raised in some other way and then I came to some. I do have a story of progressively understanding God and theology, but I've just always believed there's a God. I've just always been surrounded and swimming in that water. But I think maybe at some point I was no longer around or in the water of like miracles are possible and healing is possible and this is possible. And so when I was at this church in DC, and there was a time when people were laying hands and praying for me and speaking these different words and pictures they were seeing and things like that, I was just like, whoa, I really like I kind of missed that. Like, there's a part of me that resonates with this. What's this about? And then I go to preach there on Sunday morning, and they had just moved into this new space, and it's called Miracle Theater. And I was like, wow, this is interesting. How am I preaching in Miracle Theater right now? Like, this is something, right? Like, so it's been coming up in my story, and then it came up again in this conversation where I just kept feeling like I don't know, he's describing miracles. Like, and he's not even really using that language. Like, he just says, I can't explain it. I had more breath. He's not saying I experienced a miracle and God's lips touched my lips and breathed into me like in the garden and all these things that I want to say. And so that came up in me. It's just like, I don't want to limit myself before I even step into the
Right.
situation.
Right.
And I've been talking about that with my kids, like as they get older, and trying to like push them to take a little bit of risk or things like that. Is like, hey, don't limit yourself before you even get in the situation by like what you think might happen or not happen. And then I felt that in this conversation of like, well, am I limiting? I don't think it works that way, but like, am I limiting God by what I believe is possible before even asking about it, before even thinking about it, before even entertaining it? Am I just shutting it down in my own spirit? And like, what space am I allowing God to work and move and breathe and do the miraculous things that God does? Because I've seen that many, many, many times over in my life. And so I think that came up in me in a really powerful way where I was like, I want to keep exploring this. Like, I want to go on that journey. I want to be attentive to it. Cause that was something I heard in Cameron's presence now in life, is like, he just seems so attentive to the things that God is doing. And that, I want to cultivate that in my heart and in my soul.
Is there like a real practical place your mind goes? Because I mean, and I ask this because I think about, different spaces I occupied in college.
Mm-hmm.
I remember weeks where if someone told me they had a cold, I was laying hands,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and somebody had a cast on, and I'm like, all right, we're praying.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember weeks, literally in the same 4 years, where I'd be like, I'd be like, why would I pray? Why do I pray for that? Why would I pray for that?
Mm-hmm.
God's doing restorative work, like, in the world that's way beyond your cold. Take some medicine, you'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so I've journeyed through both of those waters. Is there a place your mind practically goes? Like, are you like, maybe I'm gonna start laying hands with my kids, like, for these particular things? Is it for yourself that you're like, nah, maybe I haven't been open to believing these? Yeah. What comes up for you?
Honestly, like, when you were talking, the words that came to me were anywhere, everywhere, everything. Like, there's so much, and I think, I hate when movies say the title of the movie in the movie, but I think that's what Making Whole is about. I think Making Whole is about recognizing every single broken thing and asking God to come there, in whatever way possible. I just think there's a lot broken in the world right now. I think about human relationships. I think about systems and structures. I think about churches. I just think about all the places that feel divided and disproportionately um, moved apart, and something bringing all of this back together, right? Like I just think if ever a time we needed the supernatural presence of God to do some things in our world, it's right now. Right. There's war, there's famine, there's outbreak of disease, we know about all these things. And like you said, like I think God's really concerned about those big things. And I know people that their marriages are falling apart, or their kids are in really bad situations, or they themselves are in really bad situations, right? And so I think it's like that's the breadth and the depth of it is like everything. Like I think God wants to restore every single thing, right? Every single place. And so I think what comes up in me is just this reality that like, yeah, I don't want to limit God, and it doesn't harm me to ask, if I think there's something in here about expectation, and I think there's something about, not to say God's going to do it because we ask God to, but I do think God has some level of desire for us to ask about stuff, right? I think that was a part of the conversation where Cameron was talking about the quirk of God to be near to people who utterly depend on him. I think it's that. I think that's the practical place, is to say everywhere in my life that I feel like I'm hitting a limit, do I ask God to be with me there, or do I just try to like muscle through it,
Mhm.
right? Like, do I just try to learn something new, or do I just try to work harder, or do I just try to say better words, or do I just say like, God help, like help,
Yeah.
I need help. And so I think that's what comes up in me is like, what is it? And I have to get under that a few layers of like, what is it that keeps me from wanting to be utterly dependent upon God? And how much have I learned to just depend on myself and do it myself?
Mm. Do, so in that, I have thoughts, but I want to hear, what do you think that God is doing something different when we choose to call out, or when we choose to depend knowingly versus unknowingly? Like
Mm,
the God variable changing in its
mm.
posture, in its nearness, in its um yeah.
That's I love that question. I'll probably think about that question for the next month and a half, if not longer. My gut reaction is that it's not God that's changing, but it's my perspective that's changing. Uh, like God's not proximate or not proximate based on whether I'm asking God to be I think like God's there, you know. Um, I think it's my awareness that changes, which then sort of changes what I expect, which then sort of changes how I behave. Like I think there's like this reordering happening in me all the time, or this reorientation that's happening in me all the time. I don't think God is changing, or um, I don't know. I don't know if I believe that my prayer is necessarily what is going to change the outcome. I think I feel safe saying that. Like I don't
What does it
think
change?
I think it changes what believe, what I
Yeah.
feel about the outcome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
if it's not like, okay, I'm going to ask you for this, and then if you don't do it, that's going to like now I don't know if I trust you anymore or believe you anymore or whatever. Like, I think it's just sort of like, it's going to let me release it. It's going to let me let it go. It's going to let me appropriately place it where it is. It's going to
Yeah.
let me yoke myself to Jesus in a way that now this is a shared burden between us. Like, instead of just me by myself or you by yourself, but like now we're together in this, with this. So I think the awareness changing in me does physiologically change me also, right? Like, in the same way, um, you know, when your daughter falls and scrapes her knee, if you comfort her by saying like, everything's fine, get up, versus if you go over to her and you stoop down and you check it out and you brush it off and you hold her and you do all the co-regulating things, right?
Hmm.
So maybe what I'm saying is, prayer for miracles can become the co-regulating practice with God.
Hmm. That's so
That,
good.
like, this is how we co-regulate with God,
That's good.
by acknowledging, I need you. I can't do this. And then together,
Mm.
now we're coming against whatever this is. And whether it changes or doesn't change isn't sort of the desired outcome. The desired outcome is that I be regulated and I
Yeah.
be safe, soothed, seen, the things that the neurobiologist would say. Um, I think
That's
that's
good.
that's where I go as I work it out practically. What changes is that I become regulated. And then that regulation allows me to then offer that to others around me,
Yeah.
right? Like, I
Yeah.
have to be made whole to make whole. It's I'm putting my oxygen mask on. All right, now let's go. Let's get some oxygen masks on others, right?
Yeah.
So that's what my gut says, is that it's not so much that like God is God is like here with this basket full of gifts and is like, if you ask, I'll give you one. Just ask. Just ask, I'll
Yeah.
give you, like, that
Yeah.
seems
Right.
weird to me.
Right.
Like, that seems kind of weird. Um, but I do think God's there to say, like, I'll absolutely do that with you. Like, my deepest desire is to be with you, to be your
Hmm.
God and you to be my people, and for us to be together forever. Um, I think that's my sense of it, at least.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think the co-regulation picture, I think that's a really helpful, really helpful picture. I honestly, my first thought goes to like, oh, we need to teach kids that
Mm-hmm.
that's what prayer is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that God is creating space for them to be dysregulated. God is able to be a container,
Mm-hmm.
right, for them in which can handle all
Mm-hmm.
of that dysregulation until they can find, yeah, co-regulation with God.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just a better, healthier picture for me. And there's still some, questions that come up like, wait, where does the asking come out? Like
Mm-hmm.
where do the miracles fit in? And I think that's part of the mystery, right? Where it's just like there's not a clear equation to this thing, which I think is what I was given in a lot of spaces, right? It was like, pray it like this and put it
Mm-hmm.
together like this and make sure it's covered in Thanksgiving. You know what I mean? Like, and there's
Yeah.
and it's like well intended, but I think what it ends up being is a way for me to try to get what I want from God.
Yeah.
And for me, what that sets up is a relationship that wasn't helpful.
Mm-hmm.
What was meant to be something that was helpful ended up being something that just made me frustrated with this being,
Yeah.
that now felt like it was either like keeping his blessings, judging whether I was good enough to get the blessings,
Mm-hmm.
um, whether I had enough faith to pray for the blessing. Like it just, and I think for me, even when when you guys started talking about that intimacy with God, just I think the language for me has been much less God language
Mhm.
and just so much. But I think we mean the same thing. I,
Mhm.
it's really been more about creating space for me to be attuned
Mhm.
with the like heartbeat of life,
Yes.
literally my physical heartbeat and the existence of the universe. I mean, you
Mhm.
described belonging earlier by even just this like the cosmology of belonging, right? Like where literally the universe is working together for the flourishing of all things.
Mhm. Yep.
The sun is giving, you know, I think about Bell all the time. He's, you know, everything is spiritual talk. The sun is giving its life for the life of the universe.
Mhm.
And that's true on a physical sense, right? And then on this metaphorical sense. But I think the more I spend time meditating, the more I spend time practicing my breathing, the more I
Mhm.
spend time learning how to regulate my nervous system, the more, I was sitting on the front porch with Danny the other day, and we're chatting about how for so long we were taught a theology that really told us, you know, in order for God to do a thing, you have to believe this way.
Mhm.
I just thought, you know, we were talking and I was like, you know, that's not even true about our experience.
Mm-mm.
That's not, you know, that's not even like, think about your body. Like whether or not you understand your body, whether or not you get how all the pieces work, and even whether or not you acknowledge even some of the sensations in
Mhm.
your body is still working together for your good.
That's right. Yeah.
You know, it's literally expelling things that shouldn't be in your body. It's introducing things to your body that it needs. It's adjusting its chemicals. It's communicating within itself, like without like the real consciousness
Mhm.
of my being, like, and all of that, whether or not I understand it,
Mhm.
all of that, whether or not I believe in it.
That's right.
And most of us believe wrong things about our bodies,
That's right. Yeah.
you know? And the theology that we're taught about God is like, no, you have to believe it all right and correct in order to be in, or to order to be accepted, or in order to be loved. And it's like
Mhm.
nothing about our experience is telling us that. Actually, everything is telling us the opposite. Whether or not you get it, you are loved.
Yeah.
Whether or not you get it, you're flourishing. Whether or not you get it, like your body is doing its best to take, even for people that are like have medical like problems and are dying, like their body is still doing its best to heal.
That's right.
And so there's just, and then imagine the moment that you get to come in communion with that body,
Yeah.
to agree about how we take care of this life,
Mhm.
and to agree about my flourishing, and to agree about how these systems work together. To me, that sounds more like prayer,
Yes. Yeah.
right?
That's right.
And now I'm giving my body fruit, and I'm working my body out, and
Yep.
I'm giving myself space to be in the quiet, and to meditate, and to sort out my thoughts, and to listen to what's inside of me. All of this has felt like prayer,
Mhm.
and feels just right in line with how you're describing your relationship with God. And I just feel like there's just so much to the literal And back to what Cameron shared, like the literal, the physical presence
Yeah.
of a person, even each person that is listening to this, right? Like
Yep.
your physical presence is a prophetic gift,
Hmm.
and we can learn from that
Yeah.
and pay attention to that, and think about the implications of those things.
Yeah. No, that's really good. I think that's right on. And like the example I'm thinking of in my life and sort of like prayer evolving in this way is, um, we started Oaks ATL Community Development. Matt Maxwell leads that work, and I get to serve on the board. And that really came out of, there was a time after we started Peace Prep that Matt and I and other people would join us along the way, but we were the two consistent ones, would walk the neighborhood and pray. And we would pray like the way we were taught to pray by the organizations that taught us to pray, right? And over the years, each of us kind of on our own were having a spiritual journey, and each of us were sort of unlearning and learning. And I remember that towards the end of our doing that, we didn't walk around and pray that way anymore. We just talked. We just talked about our lives. We talked about the things that were difficult and heavy for us. We talked about the things we hoped to be and the things we were longing for. We just expressed longing and desire and loss and love and all these things in the context of a friendship. And then we'd sort of like get to the end of our walk and realize like we didn't do any praying, but then we'd realize all we did was pray.
Hmm.
And so we'd say, something like, of these things we've discussed, God, we offer them to you.
Yeah.
Amen. And just imagine like, instead of like for 1 hour, like, and there's, let me say this, it wasn't wrong. It wasn't wrong to walk around the neighborhood and say prayer out loud. That wasn't wrong. That was good. And it did good for us and in us. Um, but there was something that was much more deeply healing and much more deeply human to sharing and communing together, and then saying, this is sort of what we offer to God in prayer. And I think that comes up in me as we think about all this stuff, as like the miraculous that I'm hoping for is found in the longings that I name. It's found in the losses that I share. It's found in the desires that I express. It's found in the joy and in the pain, and in all of it, there are miracles there to be uncovered, treasures in the dark. I think Cameron mentioned, and is a big Hope Heals theme. All of that is deeply, deeply true, and has been true to my experience of God. So whether or not I have all of the theological language to name it and frame it up for people and give them a doctrine to stick their teeth into, and a belief to ascend to. I would just say, uh, what's happening in me is that I'm becoming a person who deeply and authentically believes God can do the impossible. And I'm expressing that in my being with others and my choosing to believe that everybody belongs. And that by that belonging becomes a means and an end to expressing what it is to see the world made whole.
Hmm. Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. Can't disagree with that.
Yeah.
Can't
Well,
disagree
as
with that.
always, this has been a stirring conversation. I hope you've listened to it all in a few chunks, but we hope these are a gift to people who are watching, who are listening. They are to me. And so as a reminder, this podcast supports the work of Sozo Justice Collective, where we are creating spaces for healing and hope on the way to a more just and beautiful world. If you want to learn more about that, you can head over to www.sozojustice.com, or you can follow us on Instagram at Sozo Justice Collective. And so until next time, friends, wherever you are, however you are, whenever you can, may God bless you in your making whole.